I am very excited to have my next guest join us. He's so talented. He just dropped his debut album called Private Blizzard. It is Dhruv.
Hello.
Welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We were just chatting off camera about the craziness here in San Francisco. We're filming this on Valentine's Day weekend in San Francisco, where the Chinese New Year parade is happening, the NBA All-Star game, and it's a 3-day weekend.
Yeah, it's mad.
What timing?
It's madness. Even, trying to get an Uber to come here, it's like, I don't remember it being so difficult or so expensive to get from one place to the other, but it's giving hustle and bustle right now.
It's exciting. It's fun. Are you a fan of NBA All-Star basketball?
I wish I could say I knew more, but as a concept, sure, but I don't know much about like who's playing and stuff. So
could you name any basketball athletes or anything?
Like Steph Curry.
Okay, good. We're in San Francisco.
Yeah,
that's good.
Like he's Warriors, right?
Right.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Zion Williamson.
Wow. Okay.
Because there are a few
that's way down the list. I was expecting LeBron James.
LeBron James, yeah. There are a few that like live in my brain, but these are the ones. I have lots of friends who like very actively follow it. So anything that they say, anything in their discourse, I'll sort of absorb.
And
I'm surprised myself by knowing some of them. But I don't really watch that much basketball now.
It's almost like a music festival where it's like Dhruv and Halsey and and so forth, right?
I see that. Yeah, for the basketball fans.
Precisely. Yeah. So anyway, crazy weekend. How's tour? This is like the tail end of the tour, right?
Yeah, tour's been so good. It's been so hectic. I mean, every time I tour America, it's always very back to back, and it's a lot of shows. So we're on the 15th show now. I think 15, and we have 16, and then I go to Europe in a couple of weeks. So just I've really enjoyed it. Like touring for me now looks very different from how it used to look when I first started out in terms of like my preparation for this tour, going into the tour, and also just my ability to cope with the demands of tour in general. I feel much more I'm able to adapt touring to sort of suit my needs in some ways as well, and so that I can do it for longer, and so I don't at all feel burnt out. I just am enjoying every show, and looking forward to Europe as well.
I'm sure it's a pacing type of method where you're like, you want to live the rock and roll lifestyle and have fun with friends that may be in town or in the various cities that you know, but at the same time drinking hot tea to make sure your throat is...
I'm a very good boy on tour. I really, I couldn't imagine like feeling hungover the day of a show or something. That to me is, as a concept, that sounds like a great idea, but for me, the rock and roll life, I much prefer my like very tame, obedient, diligent life, I guess, on tour, especially because it's so hectic.
As your parents would say, that's a good Indian boy.
Yeah, they would say that. They
no shenanigans on tour.
I feel like the funny thing is my parents are quite relaxed, and I don't know, like I laughed and made a joke because they're like my sister and my parents are together right now, and for the opening night of the tour, like they didn't even message me because they've all just been enjoying each other's company. So I don't know if they're really keeping tabs on me like that, but I'm sure they'd be happy to know that I've been, quite diligent.
Where are they based right now?
They're in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And my sister's there. She just moved there from New York, so like they're all sort of enjoying time together.
I'm sure with various updates and things, there's kind of like, how are things? And then there's a milestone that you've reached or something along those lines that kind of hopefully impresses them.
Yeah, for sure. No, they're really supportive people. I think they're also like, in some ways, they they have never ever like discouraged me from sort of pursuing music, but they're also like they're not like super like enamored by it in some way as well. They're very encouraging, they're very supportive, but they also are like, they're just like, oh, it's his job, and like he's doing his job, and I think that's how they think about it now. So yeah.
It's very curious, especially growing up in Singapore and bouncing back and forth to India, very conservative societies and things. What was their reasoning to move to Singapore and away from all their family?
Well, my parents, my dad just got a job in Singapore when I was really young. And I mean, he didn't have a job. He was in London. That's kind of where I was born. Couldn't get a job there, and so moved to Singapore. Has a big Indian population over there as well, and so I think for them, that was important to them, for me to be around like around that, and also like my grandparents live in Delhi, which is a really short flight away from India, and so I would spend most of my time between the two, Singapore and India. Yeah.
And then, of course, having that conservative society and laws and regulations and things like that had to have been really tough on your mental health. What about the internet? Was the internet at all helpful in terms of trying to reach out and building a community or
yeah, maybe
befriending people?
I think the internet, at least when I was growing up, was much more local. With TikTok and stuff, it feels like the outreach is more global. Like it feels like you're part of something bigger than your city, bigger than your town. You know, when I was in high school and stuff, social media was like, yeah, it was like Instagram and Facebook and stuff, which I still think felt very much in your circle as opposed to wide. And so I don't know if I got necessarily the respite that I would have gotten now, you know, seeing people more visibly queer outside of where I lived and stuff. And so, yeah, it was tough. Of course it was tough. But I'm also somebody who's like fortunate to have had the mobility, right? Like I moved to the US when I was 18. I've lived here between here and the UK ever since, and comparatively the cities that I've lived in are much more progressive. And so I'm a very fortunate person to have had that kind of a mobility. So yeah.
How stoked were you to move to the US and go to college at Yale and to be able to live a little bit more freely?
Yeah, of course I was really stoked from a personal life front. It's complicated. I mean, I still love Singapore. I love India. I love the countries that have made me and that have shaped me, but just on a personal life level, being able to like be myself, being able to experience the things that I watched other people experience in high school, falling in love, having sex with other men, all that kind of stuff, like that wasn't open to me when I was 17. So to be able to like live freely and to know that there's much that I can live a life and be open and be myself, that was obviously a revelation, and one that I had much later than my friends.
What was it like going to Yale?
Going to Yale, it was it's great, and then also it can be intense. I've definitely met people there who were very encouraging of me. One great thing I think specifically about that school is that it has really strong ties to the arts, strong ties to music, strong ties to drama, and a lot of my friends are in the worlds adjacent to mine, are writing plays or doing things that are very different. But also there's tons of people who don't do that as well, it's just your community. It's the community that you find wherever you go.
Yeah.
But as a place, it was challenging in many ways, but also like, again, I met my people, I was encouraged, and it was an interesting ride.
College is always that time where you grow as a person as well.
Yeah.
Finding yourself and like I'm curious about the freedom that you must have felt like, okay, yeah. I'm out of these restrictive societies. I can embark on a life that I want to pursue and all these things. Did you join a band? Did you start performing for friends?
A little bit. I joined like a singing group, an a cappella group, which was, I'd never done anything like that before, but that was really interesting. I was writing music a lot by myself as well, and one of the great things about just where Yale is it's relatively close to New York, and so I went into the city for a few sessions, which is like you're working with a producer, and yeah, I had a huge vault of music that I'd written myself, but I didn't have produced, and I was looking for the right person to make that with me, and one of my friends, who was a couple of years older than me, his friend was a producer who lived like near upstate New York, and so I would do this commute in my junior year to go and produce the music that I'd been writing. Yeah.
So then it became a little bit less of an outlet of all these feelings that are welling up and an outlet and more of a profession in a way.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear things that I'd exclusively heard on my like voice memos app be produced out and hear what they would sound like if they were actual songs. And that's a crazy feeling to somebody who had been writing music for years and years and years, and who was always looking for like the right producing partner and looking to really wanting to know what their music would sound like if it was listenable in that way. So it was cool.
When you wrote Double Take, was that something you wrote while in college or prior to that, or kind of a combination?
I think I started it over a summer. I wrote the melody over a summer, and then I remember it was like a week in April or something. I was in college and I had this like studio session booked, and I really, really wanted to impress the producer because I wanted the producer to keep wanting to work with me. And so I sat in a coffee shop for like 4 days. Like I remember I would sort of go in at 9, clock out like 5, and just trying to perfect every single lyric of the song because I was really confident in the melody. And so I'd spent all those days, and I almost actually canceled the session because I was like being a perfectionist and thought that I still didn't have it where I wanted it to be. But then I said, no, if I cancel, he might never want to work with me ever again, and I shouldn't self-sabotage this. And so, yeah, I took the train and I recorded the song and I had it, and I had the song. Yeah.
Wow. And it's definitely a very intimate song as well. It's something that has definitely resonated with so many people because of the intimacy of it. Now with Private Blizzard, it's taking a lot of those internal, very intimate feelings, but on a larger scale from a sonic point of view, right? This chaos that is going on in your head and things like that. And I like the reference to coffee in a lot of the songs as well. You just talked about coffee.
Yeah.
In Grieving, you talk about coffee there. And Daggers, there's, I think, a reference to lattes, right?
Yeah.
And then Tragedy, of course, taking place in a coffee shop.
Yeah, there is.
And here we are. Now you're drinking tea.
I'm drinking tea right now because I'm singing.
You're a big coffee drinker.
I am, but I wouldn't call myself like in any way like a coffee head. I don't know much about the blends and stuff, but I like the practice of going to a coffee shop. I feel inspired writing around people. I feel like, there's like a ritual aspect to going to coffee, unless you make it really well at home or whatever, which I do sometimes, but especially when I'm traveling as much as I am, there is definitely a ritual aspect to finding a coffee shop and going to it and working there every day and stuff. And so I definitely feel like I drew inspiration from the people around me. And yeah, it was definitely the coffee shop was a big backdrop of just the writing process.
So those weren't really situations taking place.
Some of them, I mean, some like the one in Tragedy, definitely. I think the latte reference in Daggers was probably because I was sitting in a coffee shop and thinking about how people can, like, after people do things that aren't the nicest, can go about their just most mundane aspects of their life, like getting a coffee without really feeling the guilt of it actively and stuff. So I do think about like these very mundane daily rituals, daily habits quite often because that's what I really am looking to ground myself in when I'm moving about so much.
And I think that's something that is kind of a touch of specificity that people relate to.
Yeah, I think so.
Right? No different than Speed of Light, where your heart is broken and moved on with another person, and you're like, I can't wait to find someone else and so forth, and being on the back of a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Right? That paints a picture.
It is.
Where do you get the? I'm sure a lot of this is just observational, but what do you think the core of your inspiration is in regards to songwriting?
Yeah, observational is definitely huge. I would say with this specific, at least the recent album, a lot of it was like in my brain. Like it was. There were mental knots in my brain that I was trying to untangle. And when I listen back to Private Blizzard, I really think of it as a thinking album. I think of it as a time of occasionally feeling emotionally like numb and sort of realizing that there was like internal work that I had to do in order to feel lighter and feel the way that I wanted to feel. So definitely a lot of it comes from sort of like my inner monologue and the things that I write down by myself, but then there's obviously elements of the specificity that come from observation and from the relationships and from the people who are the subjects of the music as well.
A lot of it, I'm sure, is also journalistic, where you're just pouring out your feelings, and this just happened, and you're dealing with your feelings, and you're working through them. How do you draw the line between what's for personal and what's for song?
There is no line for me, at least. Anything is fair game, and if I need to veil things a little bit, I can and I will. But the core of the feeling, the core of the emotion, goes into song, and it's not even necessarily for an audience member, right? I do this it's selfish, but I make music for myself, right? That's how I started it. That's what I continue to do. And I find that the more I think about what other people are going to think about the music, the worse the music gets. And so it's a very internal process. I don't really police myself at all. I'm just, I'm trying to write the things that help me get stuff off my chest and help me feel a bit better and lighter. And that's really my only goal.
Is that something that you think you learned over the last 4 or 5 years after going viral and taking the time to write this album?
Yeah, of course. It's so challenging it's obviously a blessing to have something happen like what happened with me in Double Take, and it's a huge blessing, but also it doesn't come without its challenges, especially how quickly and how viral that song became. There's obviously going to be a level of pressure in order to follow it up, and not just to follow it up, but also in order to prove yourself credible. And all of those things just made me miserable, to be honest, when I really read into them too much. And I never really attempted to try and make a follow-up song. I always felt like the thing that would wipe my slate clean with all of it was to make an album, make a body of work, and do what I always wanted to do, which is, that's how I think of music. That's how, that to me is like the realization of or the consummation of what it is to be like an artist, is to make bodies of work, make albums.
The album is just fantastic. It's bold, it's very broad, it's very accessible as well. One and only, I'm sure, is being played at weddings, even now as we speak, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself now, and what do you think you see yourself in the next few years with future material?
Yeah, musically, I definitely want to always switch things up. It's what keeps me interested, keeps me stimulated and inspired. One of the great things about Private Blizzard specifically is that it's such a live album, and I found that performing the last project, my mixtape Rapunzel, was kind of challenging because it was very chill, very vibey, which doesn't necessarily translate for the best experience live. And so with this album specifically, I've definitely tried to just up my game in terms of show preparation. And it's been fun to see it kind of play out live, and I'm excited to continue. I have a lot of touring coming up ahead as well, so that's going to be really fun. And then as far as the new thing, I just started making the new record maybe a couple of months ago, and so.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so wow. I'm really just in the weeds with that right now. I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to solidify the next thing. But yeah, it's already very different from this, and I just think that's the only way that I move forward and stay excited.
You touched on the live experience and the tours and the shows that you've been playing so far.
Yeah.
How do you take to being a representative, a figure, a symbol for brown queer men, especially of Indian descent? How does that affected you? How do you see that? How do you perceive that?
Yeah, I guess with my first mixtape, so much of that was about, about leaning into the queer, just moving to America, being a queer person who had a life. And that was really a huge part of that record, and it was amazing to travel the world and connect with people who had never maybe seen that kind of a representation in music. I'm really fortunate though that I've lived in these liberal environments for long enough now that I think it's especially the queerness aspect of it. It's not something that I necessarily think about it as much. I think with Private Blizzard, of course it informs the way that I think about the world and love and sex and all that kind of stuff, but. Sometimes I'm just writing from my heart. I'm really not thinking about it. But then, of course, you'll meet a fan or something, and they'll say that, and it's all very, it's amazing.
San Francisco being a beacon for the queer community for so long, it's going to mean so much to people here.
It's going to be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, it's so good to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you, too. Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah.
Big fan of your music.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much. I'm
Best
excited.
of luck with everything.
Thank you.
It is Dhruv right here on B-Sides.
Thank you so much.